Going live, going live. We are live. This is WeatherBrains 442 for July 14th, 2014. This is the famous pre-show. This is that magical time where we tend to color outside the lines a little bit. The actual produced show is going to start in about 10 minutes, and if you don't want to listen to this banter or hear these anecdotes, just move the little slider over about 10 minutes and you'll catch the beginning of the show. For those of you watching on the YouTube side, we'll join cable television here in 8 minutes, and we'll get the show started about that time. Got a few outages this evening. This is kind of sad. Brian's dog died. There's nothing good about a family dog passing away. I hate that. His dog's name was Cheyenne, right, Bill? Oh, Bill's gone. Bill has taken off to Neverland, but I think the dog's name was Cheyenne, and he had that dog a long time, so he will not be with us this evening. And I think Aubrey is out again. You know, when she comes back, we're going to do 3 hours of email. I mean, hey, why? We're going to take the night off. We're just going to let her read email for 3 hours, and that'll be the whole show.
Hey, James, I did talk to Bill about doing, I'm no Aubrey by any means, but, you know, maybe we could take care of some of the emails tonight if we have time.
Good.
I can do that.
Rick has just volunteered himself. He has raised his hand to be the temporary email officer. That's the TEMO. So,
thank you. With emphasis on the T.
Yeah, exactly.
You just think that's temporary.
I know how
I think it was
go.
Mark Twain that said something along the lines of "There's nothing more permanent than something designed to be temporary."
Probably right.
So I want to talk about the guy that cut off the World Cup final for a tornado warning. So let's not forget to talk about that.
Oh yeah.
I feel a rant coming on.
Well, you know, I might surprise you. This might be surprising. But I don't know enough about that specific situation to comment, but I just want to throw out some thoughts. And obviously, the poor guy, I mean, you know, that's just brutal. I mean, I think we've all been there, but I mean.
Oh, yeah.
I cut off.
What market was that?
It was Elmira, New York, isn't that right, Nate? You were
on
that.
I think so.
Elmira, New York.
That was a legitimate supercell, if I remember correctly. That was
I think it was an EF1 tornado that touched it.
It was a legitimate warning.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll discuss that issue and thoughts about it. And I'll warn you guys that do television. I'm going to ask everybody here, what would you do? Forget what management. If you had control, if it was your decision to make, what would you do in that situation? And even if you're not a TV person, if you're an NWS person, still like to know the answer to that, because that's a very interesting little situation that came up. I guess it was yesterday. When was the World Cup? Was it Saturday, Sunday? I lose track.
Yesterday.
I don't even know what day this is. This is Monday.
Yeah, we had warnings in our area, but they didn't. I mean, they weren't cut-in worthy or anything. But I even wondered about the bug and map in the corner of the screen. If anybody was going to complain about that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the NBA guys go nuts here. If we put that little map up with an NBA game on the air, they are wicked. And Lord only knows, we had a tornado outbreak on Christmas Day. This was Christmas of 2012. And thank goodness we didn't have any warnings on my end of the state, but we did some cut-ins. And even for a 30-second cut-in, man, those NBA guys are brutal.
The soccer fans would come and burn your station down, James.
Yeah, that's true. They're probably not as bad as the soccer fans, but the NBA fans, they like to use the F word all the time. I mean, it's just nonstop.
And would that be foul?
Foul, fans, football.
I don't know what it is. It's about those, the football. I'll do a 30-second cut-in at a time when, they're not playing at a time that makes sense. I don't really get any problems from those guys, but man, in the NBA numbers, the ratings are not that good in this market. This is not an NBA market. And I guess for an NBA, like on Christmas Day, you look at those games, they do like 4 and 5 ratings. Where football here does, 60 and 70 ratings. It's Alabama or Auburn, but man, they are vocal. All right, let's bring in our guests. Mark, Sudduth.
That's right.
He has been invited. And the other gentleman, you have to help me with this one because it was a different kind of name.
Efren, Efren. Afante, Afante.
Okay. Okay, they have both been invited. 3 minutes to showtime. I think we got the gang here. So here's the new thing on Sinclair. I'll say this before we do the produce show and we get on cable. We found out today
they 2 minutes. Go.
They own a professional wrestling franchise.
Oh, now that's what you can do. Just switch over to that, James.
So we're thinking they're going to reassign us, over to the pro wrestling franchise, and I'm going to be the hello. Wow. That's loud.
Who's that coming from?
We're going to have to look here. It is from Efren's feed. Efren, there is a very loud noise like you are on a railroad track, on a train.
He's using a quadcopter in the room.
Yeah, he's flying a drone.
Not a drone.
Wow. What does that sound like?
Sounds like a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody's got the vacuum cleaner going, or
a toilet flush on an aircraft.
Except it wouldn't last that long.
You hope.
I hope not.
Wow.
Can you hear us, Efren?
Oh yeah, I can hear you guys. I'm not trying to decide if it's my cell phone.
Yeah, it's gone now.
If you're using a computer, it sounds like you're using the internal mic.
Oh yeah, and it'll pick up the fan.
And there's a little gear up there where you can click on settings, and then you can choose your device. And I don't know what kind of mic you got, but you might want to, if you got a different one, you might want to pick that.
Okay, how is that? Nope, it's still bad. Wow, that is bad. Yeah, I can hear you guys. I'm just trying to decide what is this sound. Okay, cell phone's off.
We think Efren's in one of those Indian gambling casinos over in Mississippi, over at Philadelphia, perhaps. Those are slot machines. But anyway, so Sinclair owns this professional wrestling franchise, and what we figured what they're going to do is just transfer me out of the TV station to be a wrestling announcer, and I'm going to close out my career doing that.
Auditorium.
Yeah,
there are worse fates, to be sure.
Or they might put me in little tights, and I might go out there and wrestle. I might be wrestling the Mighty Yankee or Tojo Yamamoto.
Yeah, we have a guest coming up in a few weeks that did just that. Dave Brown, the chief meteorologist at WMC TV in Memphis, did weather and wrestling announcing for 30-something years. So it could be done.
We used to produce professional wrestling on Saturday nights in Studio A at WRAL TV. It's one of the neat little bits of trivia, and there's still a number of employees who were involved with that who still work for the TV station. So,
professional. Can you at least have Jimmy the Snuka?
Yeah. I love dropping that little piece of trivia because that studio space has been used for literally everything from professional wrestling to interviews with presidents.
Hey, James, keep some salt in your hand. That's what Tojo Yamamoto used to do. And then at the right moment, just rub it in the guy's eyes. It works really well.
All right, so this is our co-owned franchise here. Let's go to the stars. Let's see if I can we looked at their roster. I mean, look at these guys. You see, my face could be in there with one of these guys.
Yeah, you better watch what you say about them.
I like Hansen down there. I mean, that guy, he looks pretty wicked. Jimmy Jacobs looks like he's on the 7th day of a 5-day drunk.
There's about a 95% probability of a trip to the chiropractor for you if you keep running them out tonight.
Look at old Chris Hero right there. That guy's all right. Al up here, he's pretty crazy looking. So that's the deal. When they come in, they're probably going to reassign me to wrestle with one of these guys. Romantic Touch. I like that guy. He's got the mask on.
It looks like a gimp or whatever you call it. Remember in Pulp Fiction? Bring out the gimp.
If I could do a pose like Kyle O'Reilly here, there's just no hope. I mean, this. and the biggest problem is if I had to wear those tights, man. Oh goodness. All right. Since we are on the cable and these people own that channel, I better get off this and let's get on to business here.
Oh man.
Oh brother. Welcome to our cable TV viewers, and we're just having some fun if you're just joining us. I like it because the cable TV people kind of join right at the end of the pre-show, and they have no idea what's going on here. And they when they joined us in progress, we were showing professional wrestlers. All right, here we go. Let me get my. Here we go. Here we go in 5, 4, 3. Wait a minute. Got to turn the recorders on. I am all out of whack here. Recorder number 1, recorder number 2 for both channels. Now, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains! Time to gather around and talk our favorite subject, which is weather, around our lovely, well-polished digital mahogany table. This is James. Thank you for joining us. This is episode number 442. For July the 14th, 2014, we are in the middle of summer, getting ready for those old dog days. And I got some folks that are out this week. But before we do anything else, ladies and gentlemen, this just in.
We interrupt this program for a CBS Radio Net Alert Bulletin.
From the newsroom inside worldwide headquarters of WeatherBrains International, this is a heat emergency update.
Okay, stand by live, stand by graphics, stand by effects, stand by cameras 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Stand by HD Superjet Copter 17, microwave truck and satellite feeds locked. Cancel mix minus to talent. We're live in 3, 2, and cue announce.
We go live now to our reporter who is live on the scene.
It's hot. Stay inside, have a drink of water, and get over it.
That little boy whose voice you heard is now 33 and wandering the streets of San Diego, drinking bad milk and looking for a razor.
Oh boy! No, thanks to Kevin Selly and Matthew for a little fun. We bring those out every summer, and we really need to do a stupid heat tips collection before the summer is over. And the problem is, it's like so cool in places now. We might be doing cold tips. It was like 42.
The polar vortex is going to be taking over soon. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Let me just say up front, we've got 2 topics we're going to talk about. Number 1, the use of the polar vortex to describe this event that is going on this week, and number 2, the situation where the guy in a New York local market cut off the last 6 minutes of the World Cup Soccer Championship match for a tornado warning. I want to talk about those before we wrap up the show tonight, but thank you for joining us. We have an all-star cast. Brian Peters is out. It's kind of sad. Brian's dog died, and they've had that dog for a long time, Cheyenne. And if you are a dog or a cat lover or just have any pet, and you've had that pet in your family for years and years and years, you know that just breaks your heart. And Brian just needed to take the night off, so we are thinking about Brian and his family, and I just hate that. That is a horrible thing to happen, so Brian is out. Aubrey is out, but I'm glad to say that Rick Smith has raised his hand high and volunteered to knock out some email tonight because we have a backlog going back 7 years now of emails.
The stack is getting just too tall. So.
Yeah, so we thought about if we didn't do something tonight, we were just going to give next week to Aubrey and let her read emails for 3 hours here. But she is on a bad schedule, and understand we work bad hours. People that are not in this industry don't really understand the hours that are required in the television business. They might see us on TV for like 2 minutes during a newscast, you know, whether it's 7 in the morning or 4 in the afternoon or whatever, but we work some funky hours, and we don't sleep very much. I tell people all the time, I'm only 22 years old. This is what you look like when you never sleep. So we're trying to let Aubrey get a little bit of sleep tonight, and you know, she's got a wedding coming up, and there's a lot of things going on with her. But she is not bailed on us. She will be back. But other than that, I think we're all here. So Rick, you are in Oklahoma, and got some weather changes out there, huh?
Oh, the long-anticipated cold front is making its way down, and couldn't be more excited. We're issuing a few warnings out in western Oklahoma. Had nearly a 70-mile-an-hour wind gust out there a few minutes ago, and but that's what you get when you get this scary polar vortex-generated cold front blasting into the state, into this 100-degree heat. Clash of the air masses, you know.
Yeah, by the way, I think we're going to establish the polar vortex buzzer is this one. The global warming buzzer is this one. Just want to make sure you got the two correct.
Important difference.
Yeah, no, then there's an interesting debate going on, and we'll talk about that. But yes, whatever. It's a high amplitude pattern, and it's very anomalous for the middle of summer, and it is bringing incredibly refreshing temperatures to a large part of the nation, the eastern half of the nation, and where we are down here in the deep south, we'll feel it by early Wednesday morning. Some of the guidance has the far northern part of my state, up in Huntsville, up in the Tennessee Valley, down in the low 50s early Wednesday, which is just remarkable. So, and it's similar to the air mass we experienced back on the 4th of July, and having two continental air masses like this within the month is pretty remarkable. So that's exciting. Dr. John Scala, I bet you're going to get some cool air from this, huh?
Yeah, we will, James, just like you. It'll be after Wednesday, but we've been basking in the low 70 dew points, so it's been a rather moist environment for us.
Is that what we're doing?
Oh, you should know that. There you go. And
more like marinating.
Yeah. Hey, there you go, Mark.
That's even better. And unfortunately, the storms have moved off at this hour. When we did WeatherBrains, was it a couple of weeks ago? I had some lightning strikes within about half a mile of my house while we were doing that show, rattling the house and the windows. So we're a little calmer this evening.
I saw some great lightning photos today from Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. There were a few tornado warnings today issued by the Weather Service out of Washington, Baltimore, just north of the city of Baltimore. And they had a big bow echo that passed down to the south, so it's been pretty active weather. But glad lightning did not fry your equipment, Dr. John.
Absolutely, James.
So we've got Nate Johnson in Raleigh, North Carolina. No finer place to be on a Monday night in the middle of summer than Raleigh, NC, man.
Well, I could live without the 98-degree high and a 70 dew point, but you know, I for one welcome our polar vortex overlords. I don't really care what's bringing it. You know, Eskimo, bad breath, whatever. You know, I just bring me some cooler weather.
Eskimo, bad breath.
I was trying to come up with something that you would be cold, and that probably wasn't the right thing. I don't know. Anyway,
could be a show
Eskimo.
Title.
Yes, and no, Eskimos don't have bad breath. I don't know anything about that. I was just trying to come up with something else cold that wasn't the polar vortex, that wasn't going to get me a buzzer. But,
I don't know if that's a good way of describing the cold, but it's a great show title. So there you go, show title for 442, Eskimos Bad Breath. We've got Bill Murray, who is at his, I think you're actually at your home post this evening. Bill typically travels. He's using motel Wi-Fi, but tonight you are in the comfort of your own palace, I see.
Yeah, but unfortunately, James, we have to leave about 10 after 9 to drive to Montgomery and pick up my son's dog. So I'm afraid I'm going to have to hit the road in the middle of this show, so I'll leave it with y'all after we get through with our initial discussion tonight. So I just can't stay away from the road.
I hear you, and again, we'll get everybody back next week, and I want to be sure and welcome our cable television audience. If you're watching on our cable system in my market, thank you. If you're new to this is a show about weather. It's a talk show. And before we get into the guests, what is this thing that Marshall Shepard is doing with the Weather Channel? Nate, you know?
Yeah, let's get into that.
It is, from what I understand, and they're doing a call tomorrow to talk about it, but essentially it's like a, a lot of stations do the little 30-minute public affairs talk show thing at 4 in the morning on a Sunday.
Yeah.
That, except it's supposed to be good. So you'll have a Weather Channel host, and Dr. Shepard will be involved, and then they'll be bringing on guests to talk about topics. I think what it is, to be honest with you, James, is they see how much money we're just raking in on WeatherBrains.
Oh, yes.
And they want to
do a good thing and look at they can hone in on it.
So that's the thing. To me, it looks like they're going to copy our show, except they're going to try and make it the NPR version, the National Public Radio version.
No, I don't think it'll be NPR. It'll be well produced, I imagine. And
it'll just more NPR.
Now wait a minute.
All you NPR fans, it's 1-800-NATE-JOHNSON.
I listen to NPR. I'm an NPR listener. No, I think the thing with that is it's going to be done for TV. Really, that was more of a slam on us than NPR, in case you didn't notice. They're going to shoot it in a studio with actual cameras and actual microphones and actual talent, and so it'll be. I think it'll be good to watch. So,
but I bet you that they don't do a pre-show. They don't talk about professional wrestling like we did on our pre-show.
Well, this is true. I mean,
these shows will still be radically different. But no, I'll be on that call tomorrow.
So will I.
We all got the emails from Dr. Shepard. So
my understanding is they've listened to weather people, and they want to make a show for weather people to talk about weather things. So.
And I think Marshall's a great guy for that, because he's not polarizing. I don't know anybody that doesn't like him, and he was the president of the AMS last year in 13, and he's a great guy. So I'm happy for him and hope it works. Maybe they'll get just a fraction of this massive audience we have on this show.
Yeah.
But Bill, take it over, bring in our guests.
Yeah, thanks, James. Efren Afonte joins us tonight. He joined the WJTV news team, Channel 12 in Jackson, as the weekend even meteorologist in the September of 2013. He's a graduate of the University of Oklahoma, and he calls Rick Smith his friend. Efren, we welcome you to the show.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's great being here. It's a shock that I'm actually on here, but with good people, it should be an interesting show.
Well, it seems like you've done some really cool things during your career. Tell us a couple of the highlights, Efren.
Well, I just graduated from the University of Oklahoma in 2013, and in the 4 years I was there, I was very fortunate to be an undergraduate research assistant. And I found out that, I'm going to be driving mobile radars. So Dr. Biggerstaff has a nice fleet of Smart R radars, the bulk of the large fleet of mobile radars in the U.S. And I was fortunate enough that it went from a spring-summer internship and being on Vortex 2 back in 2010, and using the mobile radars. I've been in multiple different campaigns. The two biggest ones, including Vortex 2, was I did DC3, the Deep Convective Cloud and Chemistry campaign, as well as last 3 summers, working with the University of Florida and the Lightning Research Center, in which they wanted mobile radars to be part of the research of storms and lightning detection. So basking in Jacksonville, or outside of Jacksonville, for 3 summers straight got me ready for the weather in central Mississippi, because boy, it's a far cry different than what it is in Oklahoma.
Well, that is very cool, and we welcome you tonight. Justin Dill, who's a big fan of the show, and our deputy guest booking officer, asked you to be on, and we're glad he did. So you're now fully deputized, and you get to grill Mr. Sudduth along with the rest of us, and poke at any other bears that you like. This is a show about poking bears for sure.
And as Mark said, he's been marinating in these 70 dew points for a couple of days now, so he's ready for the grill.
Well, there was nothing better than telling everybody that weather's not going to be too bad. We're going to be 95 over 72. By midday, it's 97 over 75, and it's just, I use an analogy, stay in air conditioning, go outside, and 5 seconds later, it feels like someone just wrapped you in duct tape. It's just absolutely oppressive. Got a couple people actually like that, and it's what it felt like at about 7 o'clock in the evening. And on Saturday, it was like, okay, cold front's coming in, and then, of course, polar vortex.
Wait a minute.
There we go. well, you're welcome to use the Matthew Selly, the Matthew Selly part if you ever need it on the television there in Jackson. I don't think there's much of a royalty for using that, so. But we're glad you're with us tonight, Efren. Thank you.
Thank you.
And tonight's guest WeatherBrain is a repeat performer. He appeared on show 417 earlier this year. He's the founder of HurricaneTrack.com. Mark Sudduth, welcome back to the show.
Hello. It keeps saying that I have network connectivity issues, so let's hope that doesn't happen during my segment. Good to be back, though. Maybe it's corrected.
So far, you sound really good. So we'll hope it looks and sounds this good all the way through. So tell us about your 4th of July weekend.
Yes, that was quite interesting. We had Hurricane Arthur that made a visit to the Outer Banks of North Carolina after bringing some limited effects to Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. Actually came pretty close to where I am right now in my office in Wilmington, enough so that my ability to remote into my main computer at home through the iPad on the road was limited because we lost power here at the house, which is where my office is, and went up to the Hatteras area south of the Oregon Inlet and got out there before the evacuations began at 5 a.m. on that Thursday morning, and I worked with my good friend and longtime partner in this, Jesse Bass, to deploy a weather station right at 10 meters on a house in Rodanthe. A real good friend of ours and a friend of HurricaneTrack.com let us use his house, his family's house, as our own personal hurricane lab, if you will. So we put an RM Young anemometer up there, pressure sensor, had a live webcam image, and it fed into our app, and it was perfect. We started it at 6 o'clock in the morning on that Thursday, and it ran, even though the power was cut to the house and the internet connection was lost, the laptop kept recording well into the morning of July the 4th, so we have just hours and hours and hours of digital wind data and digital pressure data. It's not just a spot measurement here or there, it's actual every minute for the entire duration of the event, and that's very, very important to get that data. And then we deployed one of our live streaming unmanned cameras down at Hatteras Village where we thought the storm surge could be significant, but it turned out the worst of the surge was in the Rodanthe area just south of the Pea Island bridge, the temporary bridge that Hurricane Irene sort of forced into place there. The eye was looking like it was going to miss Rodanthe, and so I decided to go out and try to get in it. And that's actually a very wise move. Usually I try not to be mobile too much in the hurricane itself, let the equipment do the work, but I just had this, sense like I've got to get out into the eye. So I drove the Tahoe north along 12, out of Rodanthe, up to Oregon Inlet, and I was actually in the center of the eye, and I measured 81 mile per hour wind gust on the Tahoe's anemometer, which is 9 feet above ground level. But that saved my truck from being flooded. Had I stayed in the safety of the house, the water actually got up to about 3.5 feet underneath the house that I was using as this hurricane lab. Jesse Bass went on up to Nag's Head, so he was fine, but it's just ironic that going out in it kept my vehicle from being destroyed, because it would have been flooded beyond repair underneath that house in Rodanthe, where the water level came up pretty substantially.
So did you take the insurance on? just kidding. I know that was your car.
Yep, my 365,000 miles on it, Chevy Tahoe. Now, I've got some pictures. I'm going to try to, if I can make this work, I want to try to share. So you should see that. The blue, this is radarscope, probably familiar with it. So this is my location.
Be very descriptive for our audio listeners.
That's right. You have to tell us what they're looking at, Mark. Uh-oh.
Now we have network connection problems.
Yeah, the screen share may make it hard to hear him.
Yeah, the old bandwidth is just fading away. He warned us. He said that he was seeing that internet connectivity issue message popping up. So
maybe it's my computing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ditch the screen share. I'll just describe it.
There we go.
Sometimes I don't know. Maybe I need a new computer. Anyway, being in the eye of that was really interesting. Again, as it always is. The wind calmed down to about 5 to 10 miles per hour. You could hear crickets about. There was no precipitation, and the center went almost right over the Oregon Inlet, the actual center of the eye, and measured about a 977 and some change pressure. Peak wind gust was 81 miles per hour, as I mentioned. But then when the sun came up, I stayed on the south side of the Oregon Inlet, and that surge came in across from the Pamlico Sound, and that came in over Highway 12 and created some problems with several feet of water. And I want to point this out. The National Hurricane Center forecast a storm surge, and remember, they just had this new product that they're coming out with experimentally, and you can zoom in and see what the surge is supposed to be, and they were forecasting 3 to 5 feet, and in some cases 4 to 6 feet above ground level. And that's what we observed. I've got photographs of high water marks, lots of photographs of high water marks, and there are areas along 12 just north of Rodanthe on Highway 12 where when you look out of your vehicle in an SUV, the high water mark is higher than your window. So had you been there, your vehicle would have been inundated above your window in something like a Tahoe or a Suburban. The National Hurricane Center storm surge forecast, from what I saw, and I'm not with the National Weather Service, I'm just a guy that studies hurricanes at landfall, and so they need to do an official survey, obviously, but it looks like they hit it right on the mark. So congratulations to their storm surge group.
Outstanding. Talk just for a moment, because as the storm was making landfall that night, I thought, sometimes people have confusion about exactly what landfall is. So what is landfall defined as you understand it, Mark?
Oh, you're going to put me on the spot for the actual definition. From what I understand, the eye, a portion of the eye has to cross the coast. The eye wall doesn't count. So if the eye crosses the coast, and so a portion of the land, one of the capes, Cape Lookout, for example, if a portion of the eye were to go over the cape, then the eye made landfall. The center of the storm made landfall. Now, I may be off. Maybe it is that the center of the hurricane eye has to make landfall, but I don't think that's right. Because if it was a 30-mile wide eye,
Mark, and then I heard Shawcross say that it was the center of the center. And is that what you think, Nate?
The official definition, according to the National Hurricane Center, and I will read it from their website, the intersection of the surface center of a tropical cyclone, so the center of circulation, with a coastline.
Okay, all right. Well,
it's a little vague because is it the geographic center of the eye? Because the eye is also called the center, but
it's the center of circulation is how it's typically talked about. But this is one of these. This landfall is one of those words that I don't care for it, because Earl a few years ago, and Mark, I don't know if you deployed for Earl or not,
we did.
But Earl technically didn't make landfall. But don't tell that to the people at Hatteras Village that cleaning up from 3 or 4 feet of water in their front yards.
Right. Earl passed at least 100 miles east of there. We had a wind tower set up at Oregon Inlet just on the south side, and it was 5 meters up, very well exposed, and we recorded an 85-mile-per-hour wind gust during Earl, which was a comfortable 100 miles or so offshore, and that strong north wind came around, as Nate mentioned, and that helped to push the Pamlico Sound into Hatteras Village. But the landfall was complete with Arthur because the whole center went over. Carteret County, and then eastern Dare County, and then exited up along the northern Outer Banks and then out into the Atlantic.
Now, Mark, before we get too far down the road, and pun intended, tell people a little bit about Highway 12 and the geography of North Carolina, because this is, I think, hurricanes, most places, you get one surge. It comes from one direction and then you're done.
Right.
But for the Outer Banks, you get it from both directions as the storm passes by. Explain why that is.
Well, you can throw a baseball if you have a good enough arm from the Atlantic into the Pamlico Sound in some areas of Highway 12, and certainly could hit a golf ball and land it from one basin into the other. So the onshore flow from the ocean, from something like an Isabel, can easily put overwash from the Atlantic coming over the dunes and spilling in. You get the ocean run up and the surge itself eventually. And then as the hurricane passes, in the case of Isabel, the sound side flooding becomes a problem. And so we saw that with Isabel as an example. We saw that with Hurricane Irene, that the ocean surge came in as Irene approached from the south. And then as all of this is happening, the Pamlico Sound gets pushed. It's like a negative storm surge. And the Roanoke Sound as well gets pushed away from the sound side of the Outer Banks, and so the water goes away. And then you have ocean overwash coming from the Atlantic, and then the hurricane passes. The pressure from the wind is released off of the Pamlico Sound, and it actually switches direction and gets pushed back, and you get this amazing surge that can come up in a matter of minutes. There is a very popular clip that I put on our app and then on YouTube, and it was shown on the Weather Channel. And it was not time lapse. You could see the surge from the Pamlico Sound coming up Highway 12 as if it was a flood, like a flash flood that you've seen pictures of. It was not sped up in any way. It was literally coming right at the camera. I put the iPhone down. It's got this nice case, so I just set it down on the road and in the sand, and you could watch it come at the camera. And it comes up that fast. So Nate is exactly right. You've got the Atlantic coming from one side and then the Pamlico Sound from the other, and they're both trying to get you. And in many cases out there, that history, it has done just that and really caused some misery for people.
I'm pretty sure with Irene, which would be 2 years ago, we had, or 3 years ago now, we had, or was it 2?
3, coming up on 3.
Yeah, coming up on 3. That the surge, actually, the path of the storm, actually, some of these sounds of the Pamlico is pretty big, and then Currituck is more or less a north-south, more or less oriented sound, and Irene tracked just to the east of that, and so it experienced a north wind for a very long period of time, and the result was it drained the Currituck Sound. And
right,
so
and it pushed it south.
Yeah, you could stand in Duck and look across the sound, what should be a body of water many feet deep.
Right.
And I've been up there when the sound has water in it, and I've looked across and I'm going, that'd be really cool to be here in a hurricane and be able to walk across dry land because of the reverse, the negative surge, as you will. But the other piece to that I think gets people is that, especially on the sounds on the mainland side, is that sound side flooding, all that water gets pushed up the river, and in some cases the Cape Fear, the Tar, the Alligator have been known to actually reverse flow, or the current has stopped. It's really, really amazing what nature can do there.
It is, and it can be very dangerous for people that don't know what to expect, and it happens very, very quickly. I was talking with Jim Cantori about it, where he was broadcasting from at Real Water Sports. The basin that they had there for the water skis had emptied, and he was remarking and showing on air about how the water was gone, and it was like 3 feet removed from the normal low water mark. And we were talking off air that that's going to come back. He said, "Do you think it's going to come up to our waist?" I was like, "Absolutely." He's like, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, it said 4 to 6 feet, of surge flooding possible." And I'm telling you, I've seen it in Ophelia. Certainly Alex in 2004, and then Irene. I wasn't down on that part of the Outer Banks for Irene, thank goodness. But I said, it's coming, you trust me. And then I saw a tweet from him later that was like, we're okay, but we had to move. It's like, I told you. And it happens fast, and luckily that water doesn't come in with 6-foot waves on top of it. And you can get some pretty good waves coming off the Pamlico Sound, and it wasn't like Bay St. Louis, or St. Louis Bay, the proper name, surging up 28 feet like we saw from Katrina. And so loss of life, even for people that stay, is harder, but not impossible, because you do have the chance to evacuate up into your stilt-built houses. But people that may be in mobile homes and single-story, non-stilt-built houses could be in trouble in a massive hurricane. I just dread the day that there's a strong Gloria or a Hugo that cuts through the Pamlico Sound. I don't think I'm going to be out there for that. In fact, there's a 100% chance that I will let my equipment take the beating, and my Tahoe and me will be nowhere near that.
Well, and this being the 60th anniversary of Hazel back in 1954, has a lot of folks, we're obviously thinking a lot about that storm and the kinds of things that it could do. And if we were to have a storm like that, or a Fran, coming up, if you take Fran's track, which basically was right along, almost due northwest, right along I-40, maybe even a little bit north of that, and then move that track north maybe 75 or 100 miles, and all of a sudden you're talking about a worst-case scenario for the folks on the inland side of the Pamlico.
Right, and there's not a lot of attention focused on that area except for people who vacation there, call it home, etc. People from D.C., from Ohio, and Kentucky like to vacation down there, but it's not your big giant. It's not Miami, it's not Myrtle Beach, it's not New York City. But for that region, it is a big deal. I talk to people that we're losing $2,500 a day in business from selling fish, etc. That a hurricane is impactful, even if it's not impacting 2 million people. The region that it does hit and affect, everybody's involved with it, and that's why I like studying them so much, because everyone's different, not only from the meteorology side, but from the geographic effect as well.
Well, did you feel, Mark, that the response on the North Carolina Outer Banks was appropriate and along the coast down to Wilmington and into South Carolina?
I do. I mean, it was a tough call. It's a huge week for tourism and for revenue for the area, and that little bit of track change is kind of like with Charlie. Luckily, say Charlie from 2004, just a little bit of a change in the heading made a big difference between Tampa and, of course, Port Charlotte. And I did a blog before Arthur came in, and I think the title was something like "Every Mile Counts" with Arthur, and that was definitely the situation. And the Dare County Emergency Management and the people that make these decisions, they don't take that lightly. It's a lot like the Florida Keys. You've got to have the revenue out there to keep the lifestyle of the people going, but you have to juggle that with these dangerous events. And unfortunately, a hurricane came knocking at the 4th of July week. Dr. Ryan Maui did point something out, though, on Twitter I thought was important, that it happened just before the weekend, and because of the way the 4th of July fell on a Friday, at least most people probably started mobilizing to go to the coast anyway that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I went back out on that Sunday to retrieve our equipment and take some survey pictures, and the Department of Transportation in North Carolina did a great job putting up stoplights. Nate, can you imagine a stoplight on Highway 12 in the middle of nowhere? That's what they have at the temporary bridge.
Well, I spent some time in Texas, so I know about stoplights on roads in the middle of nowhere. but yeah, that's the concern that we have, and it's a point that we intend on making. We're getting ready to do our hurricane special, and that's a point we're going to make. Is you think of if you'd have told me a week before Arthur hit that a Category 2 hurricane with 100-mile-per-hour winds would hit the coast on that track, I'd have told you there's no way 4th of July happens like normal.
Right.
Or that weekend happens. The fireworks at Southport aren't going to happen, and the tourism and everything. The DOT and the state and everything had just about all of the North Carolina coast open within something like 36 hours of the beginning of the rain, not even the landfall, but of the beginning of the rain in some of those areas. And that is not typical. And I'm worried that if we were to have another storm later on in the year, oh, well, shoot, Arthur was a cat too, and they had the beaches open the day later, so yeah, it's going to be no big deal. And then we might have the same kind of Irene effect that we had with Sandy.
So you did some really cool stuff during this intercept, some new things for this year. Mark, tell us about those.
Well, one of the things that we were hoping to be able to do, but it didn't happen during the daytime, so we didn't. We've got this hurricane balloon project where we want to launch a balloon, a weather balloon with a payload on it. We call it Herbie for Hurricane Research Balloon. It's got 2 GoPro cameras, and that's great for the visual side. But it also has this really neat upper air, high altitude weather monitoring equipment inside of it that is made for high altitude balloon studies of the atmosphere. And we test launched it in 2012 in Texas, a prototype version of it, and that was very successful. And then we tested it again this past June 2nd, actually in Ardmore, Oklahoma. I wanted it to be out in the middle of the central United States to make it as easy as possible to recover for the testing purposes, because we know during a hurricane situation it's probably going to be the hardest that it can possibly be, so at least make the testing easy. And Carrie Mallory and myself and a fan of the site that helps us out named Todd from Morgan City, Louisiana, we all got together, brought in my friend from Nevada, Paul Bowman, to launch this thing in Ardmore, Oklahoma. And I can't explain how come things keep working out so perfect. I know I need to knock on wood big time. It went to 97,600 feet. The weather data recorded onto the chip every 6 seconds like it should. We found it an hour and a half after it landed in some thicket, 40 feet up in a tree. No problem. Carrie whipped out this pole with a hook on it, put it up there, grabbed it out of the tree, and we got it, and we went back to near Dallas and went to our Red Robin, and we're sitting around going, well, now what do we do? It was successful to like a fault. So we're ready. We're ready to launch Herbie in the eye of a hurricane, or the eye or the center of a well-defined tropical storm. We can even do it at night because we want that data. We want to get the humidity, the pressure, the temperature, and the GPS track of what happens in the center of a hurricane at landfall. And then it goes to the stratosphere and almost beyond to a burst altitude of near 100,000 feet. And Nate follows high-altitude ballooning. I know he does. And this is exciting stuff as a hobby. Now imagine doing it in a hurricane, and we're ready. We just have to find the right one.
Now the question is, will Herbie find birds? That was one of the big topics of conversation with the radar data, the dual pole data. As this thing passed by, you see signatures that would otherwise indicate birds. Did you see any birds where you were as the storm passed by?
Absolutely. In the eye of Arthur, just like in the eye of just about all the rest of these that I've been in, Rita was especially so in 2005. But the eye of Arthur, well, a lot of seabirds, and they fly and they move around as if they're drunk. When the headlights come up on them, Mike Tice, a very popular, successful weather chaser, hurricane photographer, nature guy, he's incredible. He said it the best, that they're like kamikaze birds. For some reason, they come at the headlights and they dive at the vehicle. Jesse Bass encountered some. Other chasers, I'm sure. I've seen Reed Timmer talk about them when he's been in the eye of a hurricane. It's a very weird thing. And these are not some, parrots or something that, wow, look at these things. They are obviously from, the Caribbean. They look like regular seagulls, but they, for some reason, are in these clusters, and when you approach them, they rise up and then they come at the vehicle. But yes, Nate, there was definitely a large amount of seabirds in the eye of Hurricane Arthur.
So we were trying to remember what was the other famous hurricane in the literature that prompted people to know that this happened. I was trying to remember what that was. Mark, do you remember? It's Stump Mark Sudduth night tonight.
Well, you would know. You're a weather historian, man.
Yeah, but I didn't know, and I thought that was interesting, and I didn't take the time to go back and look it up. But that is an interesting story.
It does go back a long way. You're right.
Mark, talk about the things you were doing with the Weather Channel. Saw you a lot over there on their feed, and I guess you do that quite often. But talk about your arrangement with them and getting them information.
In other words, how much money do you make off those guys?
That's not what I asked, but anyway. But yeah, that would be interesting to know. Just kidding.
The
bandwidth scrambling.
Hear me okay?
There we go, James. There we go. Okay.
The Weather Channel is scrambling his bandwidth so that we can't hear the number.
So at the end of April, well, actually at the Tropical Weather Conference down there at South Padre, you were there. Brian Norcross came up to me and said, we'd like to talk to you about using your expertise on the Weather Channel. And at the end of April, I had a meeting, and we talked about what we could do. and we swapped ideas back and forth, and lo and behold, we have this agreement to bring our technology to the Weather Channel, to let it be shared with more people than we could ever think possible on our website. I mean, HurricaneTrack.com's been around since 1999, but we don't have millions of people tuning in when there's a hurricane coming. It's just the way it is. It's still just a tiny little niche on the internet, as popular as it may be, and as it has worked for us, bringing this technology to a bigger stage, such as the Weather Channel. And I remember I told them that, what I want out of this more than anything, obviously it's great to be paid to do what you love, but I want to be unleashed. I want to be able to use the talent and the technology of myself and my team to really bring a different perspective to hurricane coverage than anybody's ever seen, where we can put these cameras in places that we've never done before. And the best example that I gave them was when you see a computer-generated movie such as Frozen or Toy Story or whatever that's completely computer animated. The director of those movies can put the camera, that virtual camera, anywhere they want to, and you get these amazing shots. And even in live action and CG movies like Transformers or Avatar, it's the same type of thing. And I told them, I said, we can now put a camera anywhere we want to in weather to show people the weather like they've never seen it before. And they embraced it, and I think we're going to see some amazing things, and that in turn will help us to push the science more and get back to the root of the Weather Channel, where I grew up with it, loving the fact that I could learn something by watching that network.
Now, Mark, did I see you using an unmanned aerial vehicle or something the day of arrival of the hurricane?
Yeah, the quadcopter, we don't call it a drone because I don't refer to it as a drone, flew the quadcopter, and that's always donated. We don't charge any money for the quadcopter footage. You can't. The FAA doesn't allow it.
Right.
And it gave us a chance to show a perspective of the area before and after. And just as a FYI to people that want to follow the guidelines set forth by the FAA.
And now the FAA speed, because we can't talk about drones.
We got fine.
Wow.
More scrambling.
Exactly. The FCC was scrambling.
So no, wait, let's stop. I want to be sure I know what Mark was doing here. So we're not allowed to use drones. And to my knowledge, we're not allowed to use quadcopters. I can't even use one personally. If I went and spent my own money, bought the thing, did it on my own time. How do you get around that? Because you're not an employee of a broadcast facility? Is that legal?
Right. I mean, you can use them. I don't know why you wouldn't be allowed to. You can buy them at B&H Photo or Amazon. And as with anything, if you use common sense and follow the guidelines, you should be able to use it, put the video on YouTube, share it, and people can view it. And they can take YouTube video to air. We don't do anything live, so it's everything's done by the book. I mean, whatever the guidelines are that the FAA has out there, follow them.
Who's our legal expert here? Because I've been told that you can't do that because Mark is under contract from the Weather Channel. Is it because the Weather Channel is not a broadcast facility that this is legal? Or Nate, you're our drone guy. What's the deal here?
Well, I think there's a difference between, the TV piece and the not. You're allowed to fly radio-controlled aircraft. It's been a hobby for decades, and a lot of people do it and have a lot of fun with it. And the guideline is so long as you're maintaining line of sight of that aircraft and you're not, invading airspace or anything like that, you're not doing it next to a busy airport, things like that, you're allowed to do that with whatever you want. Now, when you hang a camera off of it, you start to run into some privacy things, but there's no law against it so long as you're not flying over somebody's house. If you're over public streets, if you're in an empty field that you own, then you're allowed to, much like your station's photographer, you're allowed to shoot anything you can see from the street. You're allowed to shoot anything from property that you've been granted access to. It's when you start, trespassing on somebody else's property or over somebody else's property that it starts to get wonky. Now, you throw on top of that the whole commercial interest thing, and that's where the FAA has has a leg to stand on with blocking that sort of thing. Not to say that they should be or shouldn't be, but that's where they're going to try and come at you. And the way I think I've seen most people getting around that is you have somebody who is shooting the video, They post it, don't charge any money for it,
Right.
and then the station airs it. Well, there's no. And at that point, then it becomes is the station using it in order to make profit, or they're using it for fair use? And that's going to have to get resolved by a court somewhere. I mean, even if the FAA came out and made a clear, definitive statement, they're going to get sued, and some justice somewhere is going to resolve this down the road. It's just going to take too long for it to happen, in my humble opinion.
Okay. Well, again, I've been told by the legal people here, and again, this is our current legal staff, I can't go buy one of these things off Amazon with a camera and fly it. And if I do so, I'm opening myself for exposure to be fined by somebody, or the station's going to be fined or something. So we're totally on lockdown against using those things. So hopefully at some point we'll get some clarity in all this.
Now, James, is that only because of the fact that you are a TV personality, or is that just simply because of the fact that that's their rules?
I'm being told is I'm an employee of a broadcast television station. All employees here in this building cannot get a drone, a quadcopter with a camera and fly it, even if you don't even show the video on the newscast. And you've got examples of guys that have done this off duty on their own time with the piece of equipment they bought with their own money, and the station got fined by the FCC or the FAA or somebody. So it's a very bizarre situation. And you go to 10 different stations, and they have 10 different policies.
Yeah, and I think that's your legal people seeing the landscape, seeing the people potentially doing things that are completely legal but still drawing the attention of the FAA, and that's your legal people saying, we don't want to get near this.
Right.
And so just don't do it. And I guarantee you will not have any problems if you don't do it. But as soon as you start doing this, you open yourself up to, remember, this is one of these things that you can get sued, you can still win, but that still means you got sued. Winning not being involved in a lawsuit at all is better than being sued and winning.
And the lawyers end up winning. So.
Yes, exactly. So you want to steer clear, I think, of all that, at least until there's clear guidance. That's I think what your station legal people are doing. But clearly there are people doing it. Mark's done it. There are a number of other folks that are doing it. In some cases, that video is making air. In some of those cases, the FAA is taking notice, but there have been situations where they haven't. Although the most recent one, the FAA is looking into the quadcopter video from within the fireworks that got shared right after July 4th. They are taking a look at that. So I think there may be, too, pardon the pun, if you fly under the radar and your video doesn't get a lot of hits, you're probably going to not get a whole lot of attention.
Well, just common sense, too. There's guidelines that are out there, and I know them and follow them to the T. And, I mean, it's really just like anything else. If you use common sense, if you feel like this could be a problem, then it is a problem, and you don't do it. And everything that's out there, to be able to see the storm surge high marks in the air, sharing that with Michael Lowry at the Weather Channel, storm surge expert, and Brian Norcross, that's very, very important. And it can be used to show people in the future how storm surge works. It's you can't get that from a news helicopter necessarily. They would have to park over it and have a special assignment to shoot a certain part. The higher patrol flying over, it's zooming pretty fast. With a quadcopter, you can get a different perspective to help understand the science of what happened, not necessarily to make a buck off of it. Because my assignment is to do something completely different for the Weather Channel. It's not to fly the quadcopter. That's my own time, and that is something I put on YouTube, and I don't even monetize it on YouTube. It's free for the world to take a look at and to learn more about hurricanes.
So what kind of wind speeds can you fly that aircraft in, Mark?
I need to post this. I keep forgetting. I've just been swamped with a million things. So the hurricane came and went, or was leaving, and it was still pretty gusty out there, 25, 35 miles per hour coming out of the west. And I'm waiting for the surge to dissipate. It was still covering Highway 12, nobody out there but me. And I thought, let me just try, because if I can just get 50 feet up and get a nice aerial shot for 10 seconds, that would be really, really neat. To even grab some stills from. And so I put the quadcopter out in front on the sand, that wet sand, and started up the rotors. And as soon as I got off the ground, the wind got it like a seagull taking off to the left towards the ocean, and I had to really bring it hard back to the right, and then a gust hit it. You get that gusty downburst stuff, and it put the quadcopter right into the deck, probably about a 15-second flight. And amazingly, it is a very tough piece of equipment. It didn't break or anything. But so really 10 to 15 miles per hour is going to be the limit. And again, it's that common sense thing. I would never fly it now, especially knowing, you can't get it off the ground beyond 25 miles per hour. I would never try and send it way up high very fast because I could lose control of it. And yes, it could be a danger to somebody, and I'm just not going to do it.
So Mark, what else have you got up your sleeve for future hurricanes that you can share with us?
So the other thing we did, and this was really exciting, we've got these surge cams that we put out, and you and Nate got to see some video from that at the Tropical Meteorology Conference down in South Padre. We've got a history of putting these unmanned cameras out there in fixed locations. Now, we've lost a few of these over the years to the surge that comes in and wipes out whatever we attach them to, and they fall down and they get washed away, and we never find them. And so one of our good friends, supporters, Carrie from Texas, had this idea. The whole if you can't beat them, join them principle. So we developed over the past year what we call the drifting surge cam. Like they have these drifting buoys that they put out to measure the sea surface state in hurricanes. The idea is to take one of these cases and set it out untethered and let it go. It has a live stream on the left side looking out.
You're just baiting me, by the way, to start singing Frozen songs. That's right. Twice now. I have a 3-year-old. This is reflexive at this point.
There's something to that. Believe me, it's all the Disney's got the hold on us tight.
So I've already got one person on Twitter threatening to mute me.
The idea is to abandon it instead of let it go. So let the surge take it away and let it do its thing. And we can track it with the same technology that we use to track the hurricane balloon. It's a spot locator. And I was unsure about whether or not I should try this during Arthur. And I was at that Real Sports basin there with Jim Cantori, and I thought, it's dark, but, what the heck? Let's test it. We're not going to see much probably, but let's make sure it works. Sometimes you got to just jump in feet first. So we set it out on live television, and he's a strong guy, boy. It's a 90-pound case with these batteries and everything in there. And he picked that sucker up and hauled it off and had almost carried me with him. And we set it to the edge of this basin. I don't know what you call it. It's got the bulkhead, and then the jet skis are down there, and they're all flat on the muddy, not dry, but that mud, that's left over from the reverse surge. And it was running and doing great. And they had their lights out there lighting up the whole area. And then the surge came in, and they got out of there, took their lights with them, of course. So it was dark. We didn't get to see anything at all. But we were tracking it in real time. Well, every 2.5 minutes is what it'll update. And we noticed it went up and then over across 12, around like a CenturyLink building, and then across down some small street. So it was like 3 blocks away from where we deployed it. And then, of course, I was stuck on the north side of Pea Island, the bridge there, because it got some damage to it, and I wasn't able to come south. So I was begging Jim, like, dude, you got to go get that cam before you get out of there, because he was stuck on the south side of the bridge in Rodanthe. And he had time finally on Saturday morning, after the landfall, to go down this road. We sent him a map, said this is the position where it was last reporting from, and lo and behold, he went in there, and the muck and the mud and the mosquitoes and the fish everywhere. Yes, lots of dead fish. And he got that drifting surge cam right where the satellite said it was. And so that part of it, guys, worked perfect. So we need a daytime landfall, and we can show people storm surge as it's happening from the storm surge. If that doesn't motivate people to get the heck out of harm's way, by then, of course, live, it's too late, but in a future event, and it's that going back to that whole thing about showing people the weather, an extreme event from a point of view they've never seen it before, but using unmanned technology to do it. I don't think you can get any better than that.
Well, that's exciting, and that video is some of the most compelling, directives you can have, Mark. When you're planning future events. So, this was sort of a potentially worst case scenario, a potentially strengthening hurricane that close to the coast, especially a very vulnerable one that was full of holiday vacationers. Talk for a moment about that from your perspective. The hurricane behaved well; it was well forecast, but it could have gone really badly. It was very close to the anniversary of Hurricane Audrey, and it could have been a very similar situation. So talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about that, Bill. The area has a lot of people that come down from Ohio, from areas in Canada even. There's a big Canadian influx of people that like to visit on the Outer Banks. And they deal with snow and ice and some severe weather, but not hurricanes. So how do you deal with that population and what they may think, hey, a hurricane's coming. It doesn't sound that bad. Maybe it's a little exciting. Maybe they're texting back home, wow, this is kind of exciting because it's not a Category 3, so it's not this, oh my goodness, the end of the world is coming quite, yet type of event. But yet we know in the business that a hurricane is a hurricane. They all come with these different effects, and it's just a matter of which of those weapons are going to get you, right? And so it is tough because you don't want to over hype the situation and people don't come down at all when nothing's really going to happen, but you also don't want to minimize it, and then people are stuck down there. In the case of like Alex in 2004, a lot of vehicles were lost, especially in Ocracoke, due to that storm surge, and a lot of those folks, I believe, were Canadians, and they had no idea what was coming. So it is a tough one. Boy, these things can really ride the edge of a razor blade sometimes, that you want them just to curve on out and miss harmlessly to the right in most cases when you're talking about an East Coast hit. But hope is not a planning tool. And, we saw people evacuating and getting out of there when Jesse and I were rolling out at 3:30 in the morning on that Thursday. So somebody made some tough calls. Luckily, it was not an extreme case, but you're right, Bill. When is that luck going to run out? But I think Dare County, State of North Carolina, and National Hurricane Center is doing the best they can. But it's still up to people at the end of the day. If you're going to be in a hurricane area living or vacationing, do what you can to know what you're going to be up against. We try to keep ourselves healthy and read about how to stay healthy and go to the gym and do this, eat right, etc. Well, you still have to be very weather aware. I know it sounds cliche, like a public service announcement, but if you're going to live where there's going to be hurricanes, I think you at least owe it to yourself and your family to know as much as you can about what you're going to possibly be up against. It's not always the government and the media that are going to save you. Sometimes you have to save yourself.
That's excellent advice. And Mark, talk for a second, because we've been predicting all year that this would be one of those homegrown seasons, and we couldn't have had a better example to start the year.
Oh, isn't that, that's another thing that's really interesting. This started from a low-pressure area, a non-tropical low, over the deep south, and it tracked across, and the tropical weather outlook there had it over land. And I remember seeing some people on a couple of message boards scoffing at the Hurricane Center. Wow, they must be bored to outline something that's still over Georgia or whatever. And I'm thinking, and you remember, Bill and Nate, we were at the tropical conference there, and Dr. Nab showed exactly what was going to happen, that we may start outlining something that's coming off the continent. Lo and behold, that's what happened. It's too bad we can't get all Americans to go to the tropical meteorology conference there by the next year. But back on the top there, it was very unusual, I think. Kind of like a tropical low that comes off Africa, or
hello.
It's water develops.
I think Mark is beaming up on us. We need Brian to get some Wi-Fi F lessons from Mark. Hey, Mark, your bandwidth has died, man. I think he's down to a 1200 baud modem.
Yeah, we see him laughing, but so prospects for the rest of the year. It may be a lot of the same homegrown stuff all year long that we'll have to deal with. Dr. Scala, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Bill, I was just thinking about that storm. That as long as you can get a residual low that finds itself in a baroclinic environment, He's still trying to talk. As long as you can get a residual low that finds itself in a baroclinic environment and loses the upper shear, and you can somehow protect that environment from the winds, you can generate a tropical cyclone. When I was teaching, this was a classic example. I used to talk about how you can get these transitions to occur, and it's a great example. The other thing I was thinking about listening to Mark talk was, the track on this tropical cyclone was actually further east for days, and it wasn't until it made its jog that the Hurricane Center finally had its official track moved to the west. And I was looking at the cloud shield in advance of this cyclone. That's a giveaway. When I was at the Weather Channel, I used to talk about this as well. When that cloud shield is moving due north, that is the direction the center of circulation is going to move. And Arthur tipped its hand, I think, 48 hours in advance. And so its landfall is actually further west.
Well, it really was a fascinating case, and James, Mark says he has closed some windows on his computer, so he wants to give us a go again.
Yeah, I think my laptop is just overtaxed or something. It's anyway. Let's get back on with it.
You were saying about Dr. Nab and at the tropical conference, so take it from there, because it seems like tonight every time you get ready to say something interesting, which has been the entire conversation, Mark, but when you really say something meaty, the interesting filter kicks in and the bandwidth scrambles.
Interesting. Now there's your show title, James. The interesting filter.
Yeah.
Let's filter all that interesting stuff out.
So at the Tropical Meteorology Conference, Dr. Nab outlined this new tropical weather outlook process that sometimes you're going to see something outlooked over land. That this low pressure area could come down. You think about what the genesis was for Hurricane Danny in 1997, that got its origin from, I think, an MCS or something that came off the continent. Maybe a tropical low over Africa could get outlooked. That, verb that hurricane people use, it's outlooked while it's still over Africa. Then it'll have this sort of cone of development area. New stuff coming out from the Hurricane Center. We've got to introduce it to the public. You guys in the media are going to have an interesting time with it. When you explain, hey, this may develop, it's been outlooked, especially if the computer models are jumping all over it, like the ECMWF or the Euro did for Arthur. The GFS was kind of like, well, I don't see anything after saying there's going to be something in the 8-day time frame for the last 4 weeks. You never know. But interesting times because things are changing. We've got new storm surge graphics and information. The new tropical weather outlook, I think it's like going out to 5 days now, of course, and it's a lot to keep up with. So it keeps us on our toes, that's for sure.
So the rest of the season, what prospects you think, Mark?
So we're about a month away from the traditional beginning of that ramp up in the climatology, the Cape Verde season. Now we've heard from different people in the forecasting business who say that the main development region is going to be shut down, basically a graveyard this year. We'll see. So maybe there won't be 12, 15 more named storms coming out of the deep tropics or something, but one or two of them could find that window. You just never know, like Andrew did in 1992. And then that warm water in the western Atlantic, it just seems like we may be in the setup where something could develop late in the game, past 60 degrees west longitude, north of 20 latitude, and then it's too close already. But it's interesting, 2005, as busy as that was, all of the ones that affected the United States, so devastatingly so, Katrina included, got their start west of 65 degrees longitude. We had no long-track hurricanes coming at us in 2005. Rita wasn't. Rita started just off the, near the Bahamas. Katrina was in the Bahamas. Mm-hmm. Wilma, festered down in the Caribbean, traditional area in October. 04, though, which was a less named storm season, we had 14 or 15, whatever it was. Ivan was a long track sucker. Francis was. And so interesting juxtapositions to the 05 season, which had 28 named storms, but the ones that affected us were so close that we had 2 or 3 to 4 days notice. That was it. And then 04, we had these things coming at us for a week to 10 days, but half the named storms. So you just never know what you're going to get. You really don't.
It's like Forrest Gump said, it's like a box of chocolates. But now I'll ask this to the open panel, and then I want to make sure that Efren and Rick get a chance to ask anything that they want to ask. But Dr. Knabb talked, Mark, when we were in South Padre about this the Hurricane Center getting painted in a corner sometimes because there was information in the FTP servers that might not agree with what the official advisory said. So talk about that for a second. And are they doing that with Recon now? Was that just my misperception, or did it seem that the fixes right before the advisory time seemed to come out right after the advisory somehow?
Well, I think the general idea is that there's some information that the internet-savvy hurricane trackers, message boards, etc., they were going after, and a lot of it had to do with these invests, where it might get changed to a number, which indicates that it's a new tropical cyclone, and they renumber it or whatever, and it's on the FTP server, and so people put it out there. Oh, they're going to upgrade it. They're going to upgrade 91L to 03L or whatever, and they don't because thunderstorms collapsed and it actually isn't going to. And so somebody pulled the trigger too fast that is on some message board or Facebook or Twitter, and it didn't come to pass. And generally speaking, that's not going to harm a lot of people because so what? That an invest becomes a depression. Most of the time, if it's on the fence like that, it's not doing so well anyway. Nevertheless, I think controlling that a little bit more so that there isn't this mixed message with so many people being experts now. I mean, anybody can do a website and call themselves a hurricane expert these days. You have to be very careful with that, and so they're just locking it down a little bit more. Hey, there was one bad apple that spoiled the rest of the crop, so we're locked out a little bit more, and it's just the way it goes in the day of people rooting around in the FTP directory that maybe they shouldn't be.
So Rick Smith is about as far from hurricanes as we get in the United States. But any comments on that, Rick, on the Weather Service and the hurricane issue that we just talked about?
Well, I think it's very interesting. I don't have any information or know any more about it than any of you do. But I think what Mark said is pretty spot on. It's times are changing, and people root around and look for things and can find things. And I think the importance of having a unified message, with hurricanes more than just about any other weather phenomenon we deal with is important. So, I don't know for sure what's going on, but I can see the need to kind of keep things locked down until it's time for them to be released, I guess.
So Rick, any questions for Mark or any commentary for him tonight?
Are we going to come back to this the whole question? Can we go through the panel before we come back to Mark?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, Nate. Yeah, you're the expert on this.
I'm not an expert on it necessarily, but I have a comment, and my comment is the embargoing or the not releasing this data in some way, shape, or form to the broadcast Mets and coastal markets does not help us stay on the same page. Full stop. You can't
let that sink in.
You have to, TV is, it seems fast-paced and everything, and there's a lot of that, to be sure, and a lot of these graphic systems will update things automatically, and that's great, but that ship, the ship of what we're going to call this thing, if they're going to name a storm, I'm just going to give you an example. If they're going to name a storm with the 5 p.m. Eastern advisory, well, even, in the moment, my producers, I'm going to give them the best information that I can, but if we're not getting any data, then it's going to be Tropical Depression number 6, and we're going to air it with Tropical Depression is off the coast, and then we're going to come to the meteorologist who's going to not have any graphics prepared, holding a sheet of paper going, oh, nope, they just upgraded it, and now it's Cristobal. I'm like, no, that doesn't help me at all. That doesn't make it look like we're all on the same page, especially when, in a lot of these cases, the Hurricane Center has known for a period of time, maybe half an hour, 15 minutes, 45 minutes, and there are coordination calls and things like that, and they have an idea that this is going to happen. And partnership means not holding back. It means not intentionally holding back information from people that you need and that you want to help share your information. And so I would would love for the Hurricane Center to come to the media, or the media to go to the Hurricane Center, whatever. Let's have a conversation, and maybe this is something that we bring up on a future show here, but let's have a conversation about that. And okay, fine, let's not release it to the public, but at least give the people who you want to be talking about this on television at 5 o'clock in the evening a 10-minute heads up, so that I can go and have all the graphics changed, and we can be running the right name and the right current information and that sort of thing from the beginning. This isn't a new thing. News stations deal with embargoes all the time, and my thought is if the White House can trust television media, television newsrooms, with the information about, hey, the president's coming a week from now, and we need your press credential information and all that kind of stuff, but you can't talk about it just yet, which they do, then the Hurricane Center can trust us for 5 or 10 minutes with the name of the next storm, so that we can be ready at 5 o'clock with the information that we all want to be on the same page with. And I don't think it does anybody any good for one station to say, oh, it's Arthur, and another station to say it's Tropical Depression #1 and whatnot, only simply because the information wasn't consistent. And the advisory time is what's getting us, because 5 o'clock, 11 p.m., and 5 a.m. Eastern just happen to be times where news stations on the East Coast, which is where a lot of hurricane markets are, happen to start newscasts. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
A tropical meteorology conference. We get Alex Garcia right on that. Seriously.
Yeah.
Hey,
Well,
Bill, can I jump in?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's going to sound like I'm backtracking, but I'm not. I couldn't agree with Nate more. I guess when I'm talking about releasing the information, I kind of think of the media and the Weather Service and the emergency managers as kind of on one big team, and I would have no hesitation at all. I mean, I've probably done things I shouldn't have done trying to get information out about upcoming watches or warnings or things like that. I think the more information you have, the better. Those times are horrible. The whole mentality of sometimes where we do this, well, we have some very important information to tell you, and we're going to tell you at 5 o'clock when we know what it is right now. So it's that kind of thing drives me crazy. So I just wanted to jump in and say I completely agree with everything you said. We do need to have more discussions about that.
And I appreciate the concern that Dr. Knabb talked about at the conference. I appreciate that we don't. You don't want to have that inconsistency, and the challenge there was until the advisory comes out, none of that data that was showing up in the ADEX was official until it's encoded in an advisory and then encoded in advisory form. And so the problem there was they had thought they might be leaning in one direction and then decided at the last minute, based on recon data from a plane in the storm, that, well, maybe we're not going to do that. And I get that. That doesn't serve anybody any good. But once they've committed to it, we're upgrading this thing, or we're naming it, or whatever, then let the WFOs handle it through NWS chat if you want, or let them use their media email list to say, can't say this until 5 o'clock, but we want you to know that this thing is going to get a name, or even just a hey guys, wink wink, you're really going to watch that 5 o'clock advisory, it's going to be a doozy. Even that can be helpful in allowing us to tell our newsrooms, newsrooms don't stop and turn on a dime. These are big groups of people, and once there's a certain amount of momentum, it does take a little bit of time to reorient that, usually on the order of a couple of minutes, but the couple of minutes at the top of the newscast, that's the reason we put lead stories at the beginning.
Now that raises a question for me. Why is there no, Hurricane Center chat or something like that? Is that something that could be a possibility?
You'd have to have somebody from the Hurricane Center on to answer that, but my guess is there'd be, everybody and their cousin would be in it. I mean, you look at how many people gather into some of these chat rooms during a severe weather event, and folks just, popping in, not because they have any interest in that, but just because they want to follow the chat. I don't have necessarily a problem with that, but, don't go in the room proper. Let the people that need to deal with it, and you just follow along anonymously. There's ways in the chat to do that.
Exactly. Now, Rick, any comments on that from a National Center standpoint?
I'm sorry, Bill, say that again?
Any comments on that, why that's hard for a National Center to do that?
I don't know. We have some internal chat rooms that are set up for things like that. Again, like you said, I'm far away from the tropicals, so we don't deal with that directly. So I don't know what is set up. I do know that it is physically possible to set up NWS chat rooms that are limited in participation. So if we want to set up a tropical chat room and only invite certain people, I mean, we can get down to the level where individuals have access to it. So that, I don't know what's out there or and that's ever been talked about physically. With the technology, it's easy to do that, but I really can't speak for the Hurricane Center or what they may or may not be thinking on that.
Now, Efren, I want to make sure you get to say something, and then James, I'm going to let you run that interview with Blake Naftel maybe as in place of our normal recorded segments tonight. But Efren, any questions tonight or comments for Mark?
Well, I'll tell you, both Mark and Nate hit it right on the head. Considering I went from the Norman CWA to now the Jackson CWA, a very interesting thing to think about is what would happen if that information didn't come out at all. 5 minutes, 10 minutes after 5 o'clock. Well, we're already in the middle of the newscast, so it's already too late to start putting that out there. Well, some of us do not have a 5 and 6 o'clock or 6 and 7 o'clock. There are some stations that only have one show in the afternoon, and of course their 10 or 11 o'clock show. So you've got a 4-hour gap at the worst that you're not going to get any of that information out. Now, you may be able to put that on social media, put it on the website, but that's a fraction of the people you're actually going to be impacting putting it directly on television. I'll give you a perfect example. When I got here in September of last year, we had Hurricane Karen. Now, the models were showing Karen going anywhere from Beaumont, Texas, all the way out to Tampa Bay, and no one had any idea that Karen was going to suddenly start moving towards the northwest. Now you've got the cone that's putting New Orleans right from the target. Well, now people are getting concerned. And of course, you're looking at 20, 30 different models that you can put on depending on what weather system you have in your station. So the question to that is, what if Karen started forming the way Arthur did? Or even more importantly, what if there was no information to validate through any of our computer models graphically for the newscast, for anything or any of those outlets? Now we're stuck between, do we use what we understand of hurricanes, or do we just wait for a Hurricane Center update and then put it out? That timetable of when we can put it out to the media could be anywhere from an hour to 4 hours. And in cases like this, especially for emergency management and state EMAs, that's a lifetime. So yes, I'm 100% on board with what Nate's saying. And you've seen, and Rick has said it, you can set up specific NWS chats. Now, if NHC can or cannot, but at least you can set up an NWS chat just for that CWA that's going to be impacted. So if you're talking from Mobile, Jackson, all the way out to Tallahassee, just focus it around there. If you want to bring it even further up to James's neck of the woods, because it may very likely track up that north, then you can incorporate them in. But that's something that can be done, because I've seen it before, in the NWS chat. It's something that's a very good point, and especially for media to get that information out, but most importantly, clearly and concisely, as opposed to just throwing our hats out there and say, this is what I think.
And I don't want to beat up on the Hurricane Center, because in a lot of cases, the amount of coordination they have to do, and I think a lot of people don't have an appreciation, and I don't claim to have a full appreciation for this, but there's a lot of coordination with local weather service forecast offices, on the ground. They've got to deal with river forecast centers in some cases. They're dealing with, emergency managers, local, state, plus they're having to deal, that's just in the U.S., and in some cases they're dealing with different governments, the governments of the Bahamas, of various Caribbean nations. In a lot of cases, those islands, each island is its own country, and so they're having to deal with that. And there's a lot of coordination that has to go on in especially if they name something, a lot of cases then, advisories have to follow, and that's where all that coordination starts to come into play. And so, I appreciate what they're trying to do and trying to limit the inconsistency of information. And maybe this is just a test year, but But hopefully we can work something out to where, maybe they just say, okay, the advisory time is 5 o'clock, but we're going to put it out at 4:55. That's enough time. 5 minutes is enough time. But if it comes out while I'm talking on TV, there's a pretty decent chance that what you want me to say is not what I'm going to actually say.
Or even worse, what you just said is very different than what actually goes out.
Yeah. So.
Okay, guys. Well, let's do this. We are running out of time for me. The show will keep carrying on here, but we are going to. What I'm going to do is play the Fog Bank from Skydiver, his picks of the week, and then that going to go into a special piece that Bill did, and then coming out of that, Nate will go around the horn for news and email and picks of the week and all that. So let's roll with the Fog Bank as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Initiating startup sequence.
Hello, WeatherBrains listeners. This is Dave Phillips, at Skydiver on Twitter. My first pick comes from Business Week with an article about gathering weather data from commercial airliners and the aid to forecasting that the data provide. My next three picks all come from Earth Science Picture of the Day with lenticular clouds, atmospheric halos, and bushfire sunsets. I'll close out this week with a picture of noctilucent clouds from spaceweather.com. Thanks for listening. Skydiver out.
Initiating shutdown sequence.
Well, we've got a special guest tonight. That's Blake Naftel. He says on his Twitter account that he's a visual journalist, a filmmaker, a storm observer, and a gardener. And he joins us tonight from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Tell us about this cool project that you've got going on right now, Blake.
Sure, Bill. Well, the project's basically a visual history about the complete evolution of storm-chasing culture from the point in time when it began with one individual, that being David Hoadley, as culture currently knows it as to have started, and carrying through all the decades to what it's become now, which, as you and I both know, it's evolved in many directions. So I am trying to basically make a visual encyclopedia, a living memory that can be continuously evolving down the line, about storm-chasing culture, just told through the words of other storm chasers, meteorologists, and weather enthusiasts who have basically watched that evolution throughout every decade. And that's been 56 years, so it's going back a ways.
That is pretty cool. And Dave Hoadley was one of the first really cool guests that we had on several years ago. So he's sort of the dean of storm chasing, isn't he, Blake?
Yeah, he's been a great mentor over the years to myself and many others throughout this activity, and he's still going strong in his early 80s. He still makes it out to the Great Plains, and he's been a part of this culture through every twist and turn, literally.
Well, I assume then that he will play an important role in the finished product.
Very much so, yes. So the project exactly is me this September venturing across 31 states interviewing storm chasers. So I'm going basically from house to house through a vast expanse of geography, and just sitting down and listening to their stories, documenting that on video and audio, and then come back at the end of October and begin to put this together. Ideally, I'd like to showcase this as a 6-part anthology instead of one A to Z documentary that would have to be condensed into 60 minutes, although there will be a premiere version that comes out of it. I hope to just release this, hence the anthology title, and just try to focus as in-depthly as possible with each decade. So every 10 years, just showcase how it grew from point A to point Z.
So sort of like a Ken Burns baseball, but of storm chasing, huh?
Yeah, exactly. It hasn't been done to this extent. There's been many documentaries on storm chasing over the years, and many programs as well. Both on cable television and broadcast. But it's really something that I've been personally involved with and passionate about. From a very young age, I got into severe weather and meteorology at age 5, and I became active with storm chasing when I could finally drive in the mid to late 90s. So since that time, I've really amassed a vast amount of material, and also to the help of others that have chased far longer than me, they have shared their material and offered that up for the project as well. So everything's pretty much shot short of the interviews, and once that's all complete, the monumental task of putting it all together commences.
So now, Blake, the interesting one of the interesting things about it, obviously, other than the subject, is that you raised the money on Kickstarter. So tell us about how that came about and how that worked.
Well, that happened very quickly. The Kickstarter actually occurred. The funds were raised in 12 days, which was amazing. But the plan began last November. I had started this project initially in 2003 as a smaller documentary and shelved it over the past 10 years, and finally decided to do something with it following the events of May 31st, 2013 in El Reno, and the loss of two close friends of mine, Tim Samaras and Carl Young. And they were a part of this original documentary. I had a lot of video with them from 2004, before Tim successfully deployed his probe at the Manchester storm.
Mm-hmm.
And so after they passed on, I went back to the video and I was just looking at it, and there was just so much to tell and showcase. It was like, it's either going to sit in a box and do nothing for the rest of time, or you can finally launch this into something special and really do a good job at it. So I started making phone calls and talking to folks about the idea of really making a long-form documentary. Everyone seemed supportive. And as time evolved, I got interested in the Kickstarter idea. I'd witnessed other individuals have successful campaigns, and so I thought I'd give it a try myself. And finally, after much delay with equipment and trying to get the information up on the website, it kicked off literally on June 25th, and within 12 days it had hit its initial goal to be funded, which was $7,000, and it's still going. It's still an active campaign. I'm still trying to raise a little more, specifically to offset the costs that Kickstarter and Amazon take out of the campaign, which is about almost 10%. But in the eyes of Kickstarter, it's a good-to-go project, and it will go forward in September.
So now I saw another a big filmmaker the other day that had raised all of his initial funds from Kickstarter. Are there any special deals for us when we go out and sign up? And I understand that we still have till July 25th, right, Blake?
You do, yes. There's backing levels at virtually every amount, from $1 to $1,000, and obviously the lower levels just generate a thank you notice on the website and my personal appreciation through an online video that I'll craft once the campaign ends, all the way to the higher levels, about $75 will get you a copy of the actual completed 6-part anthology. A few backing dollars later gets you an invite to the actual premiere that I hope to hold in Norman, Oklahoma next year in October 2015, if everything goes to plan. And then there's the grand prize of, so to speak, of $1,000 that actually gets you involved into the documentary, specifically why you're interested in this project. And basically every level has, you know, a growth from the previous. So that's kind of how I've targeted.
Well, that is really cool. I hope you'll target the about the same time that the National Weather Association will be in Norman in October of 15. That'll be that would be propitious timing.
Yeah, that's been talked about. I believe it's the AMS conference. Is that correct? I had spoken to some people. I didn't think it was the NWA. It was the
well, in
AMS,
October of
right?
15, it will be the National Weather Association, and it will actually be in Oklahoma City, but there will be some activities in Norman as well. But as long as we've got all those meteorologists in one place, that would be a really good time for us to all get to see it. That would be great.
That would be the ideal platform to showcase it at. Somewhere in a severe weather central region where it's the mecca of severe weather research. So why not hold it there? But that's a long time coming. I'm working on it step by step, but doors have continued to open up throughout this entire venture. So it feels right. It just is something I've always wanted to do, and it's really coming together now.
Well, this is very, very exciting, and I'm glad that you shared this information with us tonight. What do people need to do, Blake, here at the last minute to get in and add their contribution to what you're doing?
Well, they can go to stormchasinghistory.net, that's one word, and that will direct you to the main project website, has the full outline and proposed budget. It also directs you right to the Kickstarter through links that are pretty obvious. And if you're interested in backing the project, just venture to that Kickstarter link and take a look at it, and feel free to contribute anything that you see fit. And if you don't, just please spread the word in the last remaining days as I try to raise funds for this monumental project. So thank you to everyone who's offered us support, backed it so far. I really greatly appreciate it.
Well, it really shows the support of the storm chasing community, and everyone will be following your success with great interest, and I look forward to seeing you in Oklahoma next year for the premiere.
Yeah, let's definitely hope that occurs. Thank you very much.
All right, so everyone go to Kickstarter right now. That's my pick of the week, James. And if everyone would go out and give a contribution to Blake, we'll look forward to the finished product next October. Blake Naftel, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Bill. Good talking to you.
Good talking to you, too. You got a standing invitation to come back and tell us how it goes.
Definitely. Look forward to it.
All right, have a good night.
You too, Bill. Bye-bye.
And thank you, Bill Murray, for that. And he was worried in our little chat here that he wasn't going to have a pick of the week. He'd forgotten he already had one. So head over to Kickstarter for a little bit of to fund a storm chasing documentary. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Maybe the Ken Burns treatment of storm chasing. Well, Bill Murray has talked about his pick of the week. This is the part of the show where we go around the digital mahogany table and we share something weather-related. This could be, most often it's a website, but sometimes it's an app or a TV show or just something you saw. And I will start tonight, and mine is not an app or a website. It's just something I happened to see. I was driving past a local fast food chicken eatery that rhymes with Chick-fil-A, having a little dinner tonight. My wife is out of town, and I saw a sign. This is a Chick-fil-A in a big shopping center with a Lowe's and a Target and a bunch of other stuff. And a couple of those road signs that flash up the messages and everything, and one of them was, "Look before you leave, do not leave your children in the car." And I thought that was really great to actually see that. It's on the main drag as you come in, and hopefully that's just another layer to protect our kids, especially during the hot summer months. So I'm glad that I saw that, and hopefully we'll see more of that in places like shopping centers this time of year. So I'll head on my screen from right to left. We'll go backwards today. And Rick Smith, you're next. What is your pick of the week, sir?
Well, my pick of the week is a little bit different. I know probably a lot of our viewers and listeners are familiar with RadarScope, the radar app that's out there for iOS and Android. Yes. If you don't know already, there was a big update that came out recently, I think last week, and there's some new dual pole products that are available. Mm-hmm. I do have some support for the rapid updates with the sales mode, the radars that have that activated. And if you have RadarScope Pro, then you can get some really cool lightning data, and you can extend your super res links up to 20 images. So pretty cool stuff. So if you haven't checked for an update yet on your device and you have that RadarScope app, then certainly do that, because there's some very, very cool stuff in this latest update.
All right. Thank you, Rick. And we'll be coming back around to you for email in just a second. So I got a nice, gentle reminder from Jeff Wilcox on Twitter to not forget the email. You know how the mind goes at a young age. And my response was, well, that assumes I had one to begin with. Mark Sudduth, pick of the week, sir.
NCDOT on Twitter, bar none. I mean, they were really helpful in me understanding their process of opening the Outer Banks back for business, and I was able to retweet some of that in my almost 10,000 follower audience, helping out. Just, people want to know, when can I get down to the Outer Banks? And I thought they did a great job of keeping people informed, and they did some blog posts on their webpage about the process, what they're doing, and it was really neat to see that come together. So my pick of the week is following NCDOT on Twitter if you have interest in anything related to the North Carolina Department of Transportation from a social media and information perspective.
And I know at least one of the people behind that account, and that's she's really great, really gets it, and thanks for the shout out. It's good stuff. Oh, yeah. Dr. John Scala, pick of the week, sir.
Yes, Nate. Talking about some events in recent time that gaining attention in the wrong direction, and that is lightning fatalities. There were 2 in the last couple of days in the same location, Rocky Mountain National Park. So we're up to 12 across the nation now, fatalities associated with lightning. So my pick is a YouTube video that was produced by the National Outdoor Leadership School, and it's called Myth Crushers, and they talk about lightning myths. And if you have any difference of opinion about what to do in a lightning event, take a look at this video.
All right, thanks for that, and that video is good stuff. You should check that out. And all these links, by the way, will be on weatherbrains.com. Certainly by Tuesday morning the 15th, perhaps a little bit before that. And for most folks who listen to the program on podcast, it'll already be there. You can check out all the links. We've got all the information on the website there, so definitely come check it out. And Efren Infante, pick of the week, sir.
Well, I just happened to see a really incredible thing that has come out. The Philippine Meteorological Society, PAGOSA, their department agency, DOS PAGOSA, has now a very well-described interactive website in which you can actually track. And right now it's tracking the typhoon that's about to make land. In fact, it's making landfall right now. But the interactive capability that they have developed now is tenfold better than what's ever been out there in that neck of the woods. And to actually see all the radars culminate together to actually define this typhoon coming in, and all the weather that goes through the Philippine Islands, now you have a very clear definition visually from the Japanese Meteorological Agency all the way down to now the Philippine Meteorological Agency. So a very, very well-defined tool now that anybody worldwide can actually see what's going on, as opposed to just hearing about it. Now anybody with it's open source can see this, and it's absolutely spectacular graphics and very well defined. And kudos to them to coming out with that new product. I don't know how long it's been, but it definitely was out there last year.
All right, good stuff. And again, all the links on weatherbrains.com. So we're going to head over, we'll do a quick news segment, and then we'll hand it off to Rick for a little bit of email. We'll hit the highlights. And just 2 news items, one of which we sort of led the show with, and that is that the Weather Channel dipping their toes into another weather program, and folks within the Weather Service and other TV meteorologists and weather enthusiasts have been invited to a call on Tuesday afternoon the 15th to figure out a little bit what this is. We sort of got this, hey, we're going to do this email, and but really don't know much more about it than that. So hopefully by the time we see you next week, we'll know more about it. But apparently it's going to be WeatherBrains on TV, which you sort of already do, I guess, but hopefully with prettier hosts. We'll see about that. The other thing is... Yeah. The other thing is that we had a little really unfortunate news around the holiday weekend. A colleague in Detroit, WXYZ meteorologist Dave Rexroth, had an accident. There's involved in an accident with some fireworks and was seriously injured, including a loss of vision, at least in one eye. And we're certainly sending him good thoughts and well wishes, hopefully that he's able to make a full recovery, or as full recovery as possible, given the circumstances. But a really scary accident, and sort of a reminder that nothing, even though we want to minimize risk and we don't want to think about risk, we do not live in a zero risk society, and that sometimes even very low risk events can still happen and still have a very high impact. But certainly want to send all sorts of good thoughts and well wishes to Dave and his family, and hopefully he's able to recover quickly. So let's move on now to the email segment. I don't have the catchy jingle. I think we're going to need to find a way so that James, when I have to take over, that he can share his desktop so that I can play all the jingles.
There's 4 of us. We could do a quartet jingle.
Yeah. So it's a tenor, soprano, alto, bass.
Frozen again.
Very good.
No. Just
listeners are
let it go, Efren. The cold never bothered me anyway. So since Aubrey's not here, she hasn't been able to join us last week and won't be here, obviously isn't here tonight, let's dig through at least a little bit of email tonight, and we'll hand that over to Rick Smith.
Yeah, we won't be able to get to all of it, but I did want to kind of take a little bit of the load off, and I'm no Aubrey by any means, but I want to go through here and share some of the highlights of email. Let's see, here's one. Dear WeatherBrains, I just discovered your site and am fascinated. When did you begin? And is there any rough idea of how many viewers and listeners you have? And this came from Bob Myers, and this is scary, who's a cultural anthropologist studying the vast network of weather people. So we're being analyzed. And I think Bill responded to the email, and I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it's in the tens of millions, how many viewers and listeners we have. So thanks, Bob, for listening and studying us, and for checking in. Here's an email from Josh in Memphis. Hello, I'm a big fan of the show. Just wanted to suggest a guest, Dave Brown, who's the chief meteorologist from WMC TV in Memphis. He could probably tell lots of great stories about Memphis weather and Memphis wrestling, and that may be something James could use after we heard earlier in the show.
And Dave's got a great set of pipes too. That's going to be a good show.
Yeah, so we've got Dave coming on August 18th. So I'm looking forward to that. I grew up watching Dave, and he was one of the people that kind of indirectly led me into weather. So I'm pumped to talk to him. Let's see. Here's one from Richard in the Scotland Western Isles. A bit of a cheeky question, so I'll understand if you don't get it.
No, that's what we do here is cheeky.
That's what we specialize in. That's our speciality. I run a weather page on Facebook. I have 4,600 people. My issue is with Twitter. I've launched an account, but I struggle to condense my detailed forecast into 140 characters. How do you guys do it? Very difficult, with not a lot of ease, I guess. I don't know. That's one of the challenges we have in our office is condensing information. We have trying to not use so many acronyms and abbreviations, and sometimes you have to do it in several tweets. That's how we do it. Let's see.
We could just send out the TAFs.
There you go.
Each couple of blocks of the TAF get you through the first 24 hours. That'll fit in 140 characters,
sure.
Right?
Make it all coded. Let's see. We had a long email from Jeff Podolsky about an event that happened back on June 23rd that had to do with something in the span says siren still suck category. There was a link shared there. I'm hopelessly addicted to WeatherBrains. I enjoy having John Scull and Rick Smith as newest members, and I miss Kevin. And he tells all of his friends about us. And let's see. And we also had a couple of surveys that were sent in. If you didn't know it, you can go to the WeatherBrains.com website and actually fill out a listener survey. And we had one from Steve Welsh, who from Tustin, California, who offered some good tips and information. He lives in Southern California. He says they don't have a lot of weather, but he was interested in maybe hearing something about Santa Ana winds and the firestorms they create. So that's maybe a topic for the future. And he's a ham radio operator, W6SEW. So, if you're a listener and you haven't gone in and done a listener survey yet, please do that. Let us know what you think, and we'd love to hear from you. So I think that's a good overall summary. That's not everything, but that'll take the load off a little bit.
You got all the good emails, and we'll leave all the nasty grams for Aubrey when she gets back.
That's what I did.
To deal with all that.
These are just the good ones. So.
All right, so James threatened to do this, and of course he ran out on us. But I want to go around the table, and we've got a couple of broadcasters, Weather Service, and then we've got Mark, who has, I think, a unique viewpoint on some of this. I wanted to ask one question. First off, there was the station in southern New York and northern Pennsylvania had to cut off the last few minutes of the World Cup, the final of the World Cup, including what apparently was the winning goal by Germany, Deutschland über alles. And he took a lot of grief for that. And I think just about everybody in TV can sympathize. And I really wish James were here because I'd love to know what he thought, since he said he was going to surprise us. But we'll sort of go down the line, and Efren, we'll start with you. Would you, well, maybe it's an easier question. Is there anybody here who would not have cut in? Crickets. All right. So, yeah. So the question at that point is how do you do it, how long, and whatnot. And I haven't seen the video. Apparently there was an EF1 tornado that was confirmed out of that, so it wasn't like, obviously a lot of times you don't know that at the time. Not every tornado spins up like the ones in Oklahoma, and I don't need dual pole radar to know that's a tornado. I can look at it and go, hey, there's probably something there. And you've probably got dozens of chasers and spotters underneath it telling you what's happening. Here on the East Coast, that's a little harder to deal with. So, and actually, I'm told now that they did miss. They cut off right after Germany's goal. So Germany's goal was on, but then they cut in after that. So
and they lost the last 6 minutes.
Yeah, but so you did not see the final outcome of the game, or the outcome of the game. But anyway, I think that's a really sticky question, and I've always looked at that. And when I have to answer those questions when we interrupt programming here at WRAL. I say here, I'm not there, I'm at home, but you get the idea. And one of my sort of stock lines there, and I think it's true, is we're trying to balance the needs of the few against the wants of the many, and to borrow a line from Star Trek. And I think that's, or to paraphrase, I think that's an important thing, that yes, I'm taking something from what people want from a lot of people, but trying to take care of a very small, relatively smaller number of people. But the rub is that a lot of times, if we didn't cut in and the tornado hit your house, I guarantee you we'd get emails going, why weren't you on? So that's a challenge, I think, that broadcasters face. And I know that this probably comes as no surprise to folks that listen to this program, but that's not something that TV folks want to do. We don't interrupt programming to hear ourselves talk. Rather not have to do it. But if the situation calls for it, if the radar signatures suggest that there's something there we need to let people know about, that's part of why we exist. That's part of why the federal government and the people of the United States through the federal government have entrusted us with the public airwaves. That's public service, and that's one of, quite frankly, in a lot of cases, one of the few public services that television stations really do, and I think do well. So hopefully we'll see more of that. That sort of thing comes up, and sports fans, I think, come along from time to time. So,
I'm going to dive into this really, really cautiously.
Yep, go right ahead.
And being in Rick's CWA for 4 years, it really depends on the DMA. It depends on the market. In Oklahoma, the television stations in Tulsa and Lawton, Wichita Falls, and Oklahoma City, if there's a severe thunderstorm warning, and a significant one, and now with the new warnings designed now, whether it's a severe thunderstorm, no tornado possible, or severe thunderstorm warning, tornado possible, even with that new criteria, in Oklahoma, you can get away with breaking in because the storms in Oklahoma are, could be significant. We're talking hail, baseball possible. You're talking winds 60, 70 miles an hour. Now take that in the markets that James and I are in. Yes, tornadoes do happen, not as frequently, but don't have as much of a criteria for a severe thunderstorm warning. Now, tornado warning, that's the hard part. We are designed by meteorologists that if there is a tornado warning, we are the information media to get out there to the public and let them know, you're in harm's way potentially, whether it's radar indicated or actually on the ground. Would I do it? That's a very, very tough call, but it warrants defining, do you actually cut in for all tornado warnings, and especially New York? If you remember, and I can't remember exactly what year it was, but you had the Cambridge, the St. Charles River tornado that came right out of Cambridge, and people in Boston are like, what is this? But that's coverage that they had to do. I guarantee you, if the Celtics were in the middle of playoffs and you did something like that, everybody would be raising Cain.
They get lit up. They'd get lit up on social media, but does that mean they were wrong?
Well, yeah,
does that mean? I mean that you could make the case that in the Northeast, tornadoes and severe thunderstorms are more rare events, and therefore probably should be covered more heavily, not less, than you would in Oklahoma, based on the idea that folks in Oklahoma, they're used to it. And I'm not saying you wouldn't cut in for a tornado, but I think the threshold, for cutting in for severe thunderstorm warnings, for example, is probably lower in some places, especially in the Northeast, because you could get 1 inch hail and 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts out of a thunderstorm in the upstate of New York. That doesn't happen every day, and that might warrant a little more of a of attention from folks in on TV. But it's really is a sticky question. So other thing,
I don't want to call anybody out, but I mean that there was a couple of years ago where there were I believe it was 3 tornado warnings somewhere in northern New Jersey, and regardless of which television station wasn't covering it, none of the television stations were coming on. Now, being from New York, I had family and friends asking me what's going on, because the TV doesn't say anything at all. Now, the crawl was going, which of course is very beneficial, but there was no break-in news, there was no cut-ins, and ironically enough, it was 5 minutes before the newscast started. So now they're talking about it going into the news, but they never cut in. No tornadoes ever hit the ground, but there were tornado warnings. So again, you're talking about that part of the Northeast and New England. Would you cut in for tornado warnings? In that case, they didn't, but it was just before the 5 o'clock newscast started.
I think this underscores the need for stations to have a policy, for everybody to know what that policy is, and if it's you cut in on every tornado warning, then you cut in on every tornado warning. On the other hand, and you always have to think about what the programming is. That doesn't necessarily mean that you will not cut in. It may mean that you wait until one of the stories that was told that my first station in Abilene, Texas, before I got there, the chief meteorologist there had a tornado warning issued during the Oscars. And literally the cut-in could not have been timed worse, because he cuts in and it's and the Oscar for Best Picture, the one that people have been waiting for all night, goes to, and then it drops in the intro and the phone lines lit up before he'd even started talking. But at the same time, if he'd have waited 10 seconds, I don't know that would have affected anything. And people at least they'd found out who it was. They might not have heard the speech and whatnot, but it's a really sticky thing. I would have cut in. I probably would have stayed on. The nice thing is that we can at least shift programming to our subchannel, our .2. We can blow out whatever's there and shift our normal programming there. That doesn't get satellite people. Unfortunately, that's just not. Unfortunately, they don't carry those channels in a lot of cases. But that does get somewhere in the order of a half to 2/3 of the people in our market between cable and antenna folks. So that gets, more people. It's not everybody, but at least it's something. But I reject the notion that the crawl is enough. If the crawl was enough, then nobody would ever cut in. The crawl is, it's helpful, and in some cases it's warranted instead of a cut in for lower threat events and that sort of thing. But with all the tools and everything, especially if you've got a live radar and somebody who knows what they're doing with it, that can provide very beneficial minutes to folks. And if you've got pictures of it and that sort of thing, that can also help to reinforce things. So I want to do one other thing. We're sort of running on 2 hours now, and I want to wrap this up. But I want to ask Dr. Scala. I'm going to put him on the spot here. polar vortex or not?
Oh, man.
Someone hit the button.
Go. He's got a PhD. He's the only one in the room with a PhD, so I want to know what he thinks.
And he's
if anybody in the room is qualified to offer an opinion on this, we look to you, sir, for expert testimony.
PhD, and he's not afraid to use it. You know, I was actually contacted by the newspaper over the weekend about this.
Good.
Yeah, they wanted to do a story. Actually, it was Friday, and the story appeared in Saturday morning's paper, front page. And they wanted to talk about the polar vortex. And I said, this is a semi-stationary feature in the wintertime. It doesn't exist year-round, although we do have lows that migrate around the northern hemisphere. But at this point, I said we have an anomalous cold air pool that's descending south. And as we've looked at it, the 7-day loop of the IR imagery shows that this had its origins actually in British Columbia, and was actually the ridge looks like it was driven by a typhoon in the western Pacific. So in reference to your question, is this the polar vortex? Polar vortex went to sleep. This is an anomalous low that just decided to make its way into the U.S.
So you reject the argument that Jason Samenow of the Washington Post and Capital Weather Gang made, where he says that it was the polar vortex, and he uses 3 maps, including a European animation of 500 millibar heights, the high split backward trajectory, and the high altitude winds from the North Pole. So have you seen that article yet? And I'm guessing
I hadn't.
Okay.
But this area of low pressure, this low pressure center, actually originated coming out of Western Canada and did its loop. I don't agree with this high split trajectory. Not what I've seen in the IR imagery.
All right. So we have not polar vortex from Dr. Scala. And he's got the PhD, and he's not afraid to use it. So there we go. I do think that this is it's been a very interesting conversation we've had on a Facebook group for broadcast meteorologists, and I give credit to Jason from the Capital Weather Gang for starting it. You know, should we be talking about this and that sort of thing? And I think the discussion of does this meet the qualifications of is it the polar vortex or not? Well, sure, we should talk about that because that's what we do. I'm not sure that that's a conversation that is interesting to most people in the general public. They want to know, oh, it's going to be unseasonably cool, which means it might actually be comfortable outside. Do you get into the notion of what it is? Perhaps, but I think that's something where maybe an invitation only kind of thing. You know, some folks may be interested in that, some folks may not. But you got to know that if you're on TV and you start droning on about whether it is or isn't, you're probably going to lose some folks. So, any other comments on the polar vortex or tornado warnings during the World Cup or chasing hurricanes or anything else before we wrap it up for the night?
I just want to hear the buzz when we said polar vortex a few times.
So, Efren, where can folks get a hold of you if they want to find you on the interwebs?
Well, they can look me up on Facebook. I'm on Facebook, Efren Afante, WJTV, as well as Twitter, the same name. And they can look me up on the WJTV the webpage, WJTV.com. And I'll be sure to be putting a lot of information that we discussed about today, or tonight rather, both on Facebook and Twitter. So they'll have a link to, as well, the show, which we will have then put on WeatherBrains tomorrow, I believe.
Sounds good. Mark Sudduth, how can folks find you on the entire webs if they want to follow your next chase exploit and see some of the video you've talked about, including the highly controversial quadcopter video?
Quadcopter, very good. Not a drone. Hashtag
no.
Not a drone. HurricaneTrack.com as the starting point, and then of course everything related to that at Hurricane Track on Twitter, Facebook.com/HurricaneTrack. We do provide a live Ustream feed from our vehicle It actually goes wherever we go. We call it our Everywhere Cam on Ustream, and we make that available free to the public all the time. And so during our missions, people can watch as we do what we do, and hopefully we'll do so safely like we've done for the better part of almost 2 decades.
Do you get a kickback from every 7-Eleven you pull up at to get gas?
You know what? That's
Everywhere Cam.
We talk about that people, we don't pull into gas stations, and because people say, wow, you've got the best job in the world. I bet that, people, you get all kinds of attention, and it's almost like being, and this is just a delusion of grandeur, and I can't think of a better way to put it, but it's almost like being a superhero where until there's a hurricane, we're like the Incredibles. We just need to be in retirement and go away. We don't want to hear about it.
There he goes, talking interesting again, and he gets filtered out. The interesting filter is still alive and well here tonight. But
you can put a copyright on that, Nate.
Move along.
Yeah. HurricaneTrack.com for Mark Sudduth and his exploits. Really a great follow during any sort of tropical event if it's making landfall and they're out deployed. A lot of good data and everything, and ground truth. And Mark's a good guy. He's operating here out of North Carolina, and we love the good press for the great state of North Carolina anytime we can get it.
Well, thank you, sir. All of you.
Well, we appreciate having both of you guys on the program tonight. We will wrap it up here. It is Weather Brains. This is episode number 442. We've been doing this all about the weather netcast for going on a decade now. We typically record it on Monday nights, 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central, 7:30 Mountain, 6:30 Pacific, 5:30 Alaska time, or 4:30, I don't know. You get past the Pacific time zone and it all gets fuzzy to me. But most people listen after the fact through podcast or on WeatherBrains.com. You can view the live video or on WeatherBrains.com. You can also find a link to podcasts. So if you listen via podcast, or if you would like to, you can subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, that sort of thing. We love getting the comments and the ratings on iTunes, so we appreciate that. You can also find us on the internet. We are on WeatherBrains.com. You can send us an email, send us a news tip, or guest suggestions. We'll take those at email@weatherbrains.com. You can also tweet us at WeatherBrains. We are plus WeatherBrains on Google+. We are WeatherBrains on Facebook. Go figure. We are WeatherBrains. I am not James Spann. Good night, and God bless.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Thanks, guys. Efren, Mark, we appreciate having you on. Take care.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you guys later.
See ya.
See ya.
Oh, yes. Yes. Look at all these people still here. Wow. Always creeps me out. Just back off the television side here. Trying to figure out when they wrap this show up here. Whatever. Thank you guys for watching. Yeah, and we didn't get to talk about the World Cup soccer thing. There was a station in Elmira, New York, I think, that interrupted the World Cup final game, match, whatever you call it, with like 6 minutes to go, and for a tornado warning. And I can see both sides of the issue. And what I was going to say on the show, I have not researched it. I don't know the circumstances. I don't know why the warning was issued, if it was based on radar, if there was, a report of a tornado. Apparently there was an EF1 tornado that did touch down and cause a lot of damage. So the question is, if that were to happen to me, what would I do? And I'm beginning to think my answer might be a little different these days. With every year, times are changing in the way people consume media. And obviously television has a very important role in the severe weather process, the long-form coverage, the you know, all the information, the live streams of the tornadoes, the radar, all this stuff, the dash cam stuff. That's a big deal. But, you know, we are very cognizant of the fact that a lot of people don't use traditional television. And I'm beginning to think that we might have to just look at our policy. And look, within 10 years, this is no big deal. It doesn't matter anymore. Within 10 years, it just doesn't matter anymore. There'll be enough bandwidth, and, you know, we'll be able to stream, you know, regular programming and weather and all that straight to the television set-top boxes. But if I did not have another channel in the market in which I could go on, I would probably hold up. If it was not a situation that looked overly serious, if there were no reports, in knowing that other stations in town would be on the air, if you had multiple stations doing aggressive coverage, I might just hold up on that. But again, I don't know enough to tell you what I do, but I would consider waiting the 6 minutes out, letting the soccer match finish, and then going on the air. Of course, I'd have a crawl going on the bottom of the screen to let people know, and to, you know, check the social media feeds and all these other things. But again, we'll talk about that on the show next week. Yeah, so the new owners here, we learned today that they have a professional wrestling franchise in their portfolio. So we're thinking that maybe they'll transfer some of us over to the professional wrestling side, and that would be a change of pace for me. But no, we still don't know. Here it is, July 14th, and we just don't know. So we'll find out. But I got to go, man. It's late. I got a busy week coming up. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great week. We'll see you next week. Good day and good night. Good luck, and God bless.